Hello, I'm Brett Lowe. I've been the bandmaster for a few years at Kerepehi Band, and but have a interesting little backstory. I first played with the band in 2012 after moving to Pairoa in 2008. They phoned me up and asked me to help out at Anzac Day, but then wasn't involved with the band again until 2014 when they asked me to help out for Christmas and a couple of other things, and then offered me the role of bandmaster halfway through 2015. But I have a connection to the band that goes back much further than that, way back to the 1940s, right at the beginning of the band, when my trumpet teacher, when I was growing up in Auckland in the 1980s and 90s, Vivian, I found out that it was his father who formed the band back in 1946. So they mentioned that he'd come from somewhere down near Pairoa and Ngatea, but he never mentioned too much about the band, and I turned up in 2012 to play with the band, and here's a photo of him at 13 years of age on the wall. So that was a really nice connection to come along and find. So I took over bandmaster with the band in 2015, and we were down averaging about 5 to 7 players a night at rehearsals, with people such as the bandmaster when I first joined, Chris Geelan, who was only able to make rehearsals about once every month to once every 6 weeks because he no longer could drive anymore, and he was relying on his family bringing him to rehearsals. And there were a number of other senior players in the band who weren't always able to make rehearsals, like Keith Pull, who'd been in the band for a number of years, from a time when his daughter used to play, and then served as president and all sorts of other things before learning how to play drums and joining the band and playing then. But his health wasn't very good, and he joined the band, and he had joined the band and played for a number of years, but was only able to come about once a month as well. So, and then a few months after I joined, Andrew Willis, who was the solo cornet at that stage, invited a number of players from the college jazz band, including Luke, who's now president of the band and quite involved. So he stuck around, but most of the others didn't at that stage. All right, so I took over as bandmaster shortly after Anzac Day in 2015, and at that stage the band had been a number of years where it had only been playing for Christmas parades and for Anzac Day and Anzac Day parades. And so I talked to a number of the people in the band and encouraged everyone to start concerts on a regular basis. The numbers were in decline, and we wanted to try and get more players involved with the band and get things happening that would attract new players and keep the existing players interested. So we decided on a concert for August of 2015, and we even though we had a small group, we pulled together some appropriate music, a variety of different things. I think the first concert was based around music from Europe, so we chose some music from Italy and Spain and all different parts of Europe and pulled it together and had a concert at the cooperating church in Ngatea with those of us who were available, and things started to go from there. So after a little while, with just a handful of us, we had Andrew Willis and Milton Green, I think his name is, on cornet, Sietske de Jong on flugelhorn, Heather on baritone, Heather O'Hagan, and Jack Brooks at the time on euphonium, Chris Geelan, who had been bandmaster, on trombone, and Rowan and Joe de Jong on basses, and that was it. And Chris Pull, when he could make it, in the band at the time, and I was sort of leading and playing tenor horn at the time because we didn't have any tenor horn players. So that would have been the first concert that we did when I was bandmaster, and things seemed to start going well. We did another concert a little bit later, and it may have been we did the American concert first or the European, but we did a program that was all American music and themed around that. And we did that sometime shortly thereafter, and then had our Natia garage sale that we played for, and the Christmas that year I decided that we would try playing in all the local band rotundas. We'd been advised that we weren't allowed to do any Christmas caroling because unless we had seatbelts for all the players, the Ministry of Transport or police or whoever it was wouldn't allow us to travel from place to place on the back of a truck anymore, and so we had to get on and off the truck to do Christmas caroling and walk behind the truck and then get on again if we wanted to do Christmas caroling. So instead we found the band rotundas in Pairoa and a couple of locations in Ngatia and Turua, and had our rehearsal nights playing Christmas carols and the programs that we'd been practicing in those places. And then the next year we sort of made a bit of a plan up and aimed to have a play out somewhere every month for the next year, and included concerts and Anzac Day and all sorts of other events that we found. We managed to do a couple of concerts, one with the Kerepehi concert band in Waihi, and the following year we did a similar concert again for Kerepehi concert band at the Salvation Army in Waihi. We also we did our own concerts. We did concerts in Pairoa and in Ngatia that year, and Anzac Day, Christmas events, the Ngatia garage sale again, and we brought back the solo event for players within the band, that over the winter months, in July in particular, instead of doing a concert, we'd all get together and everyone would perform a piece each, and that went down very well that year, and then continued the same pattern the next year, except the next year we did concerts with the Ohinamiri Singers instead of Kerepehi Concert Band, and did a concert at Richmond Villas in Thames, and a similar concert at the Baptist Church a month later in Pairoa, at which Luke did some saxophone solos and things like that. I'm trying to think. About the same time as we started doing all of that, I'd been asked to help out the Salvation Army band in 2014 in Waihi, and about that time Peter and Leonie Robertson joined the Salvation Army band, about 2015 or so, and then Peter said to me, why don't I come and help out with the Kerepehi band sometimes, or offered whether he'd like me to. He'd heard that we were doing it, so Peter came along and he became involved, was probably involved for about 3 years before Leonie also came along and joined him. So, and I think it was through that band that people like Rosemary became involved with the Kerepehi band. I might have said to her, or Peter had, that she might like to come. So one of the big things that happened in the second year that I was conducting with the band was the 70th anniversary. So in September of 2016, we held a big anniversary with a number of playouts in different places, but mostly focused around Pairoa that time, because the anniversary the last time had been in Ngatea. And so we held a morning tea at the band rooms on the weekend we chose, and it coincided with the Antiques weekend in Pairoa. So we performed in the main street just set up on. We were going to be playing in front of the post office, but the weather wasn't so good, so we moved under the awnings of one of the shops and played a number of pieces while they had a vintage car parade and things like that for the Antiques weekend. And then we had a big concert in the afternoon, and included a lot of former players and friends from other bands, including Thames Citizens Band and Kati Kati Concert Band. Waihi and Thames Salvation Army bands had players who joined us, and several former players came along and played as well. We played it in the War Memorial Hall in Pairoa, and included some of the former bandmasters came and did some conducting, including Max Vivian and Chris Geelan. And of course myself playing. We also presented Rowan with a long service award for 70 years, and Jack Brooks with something similar because he had been involved in the band. So not long before that, I think Jack's daughter Raywin joined the band, and shortly after she'd been playing for a while, she got roped into being librarian because Rowan wanted to give up doing that job. He'd been doing it for a while. In the evening of the anniversary weekend or anniversary day, we had a dinner which we invited former players to, or people who'd been associated with the band, and a number of people spoke at that dinner, including both Max and Vivian. I think Eric Goss was present and videoed it. So one of the great things that happened at that event, though, was former players such as Eric Goss and both Don and Barry Robinson came back to the band as a result of that thing. They hadn't been playing for a number of years, and so it was a real boost to the band to have all these extra players come back after so many years. But sadly we had a number of things shortly thereafter where we lost some of the people associated with the band. So about 3 or 4 weeks after, maybe a few more, after the anniversary, we had the sad news that Vivian, who had played in the band as a child and whose father and brother Max had both been bandmasters, he passed away from a heart attack shortly thereafter, and a number of the band attended his funeral to show our support and condolences. So they had been my trumpet teacher, so I felt that quite closely. And within a year we'd had another, or a couple of years at any rate, we'd lost another couple of stalwarts of the band for a number of years. So sadly Chris Geelan, who had been bandmaster prior to myself, passed away the next year, and sometime after that also Jack Brooks, who'd been the principal euphonium and also very involved in the band. So it was very nice for both Chris and Jack's funerals that we were able to be part of the funeral ceremony as a band and play for them, which was a nice thing to do. We had a couple of other people pass away during my time as band leader, who were associated with the band but not actually members. One of those was the bandmaster of the Thames Salvation Army band. I'm trying to think of his name, it's just escaped me for a moment. I can see him, but a lot of Kerepehi members had played, including Rowan and Keith Pull, with the Thames Salvation Army band for many, many years, but the Kerepehi band had often helped Thames Salvation Army band out, and vice versa. We'd had a number of players who had played with them on and off, with us on and off for the year over the years. And so it was really sad when we had, I'll try and think of his name in a minute, will come to me, a lovely gentleman who his eyesight was in decline, and he could play almost every hymn in the Salvation Army hymn book from memory. So he was lovely man, and he often would join us for Christmas events and things like that, and vice versa. A number of Kerepehi players would go and help out there. And the other person who shortly just after I left my time as bandmaster with the band was finally, after many years of declining health, sadly Keith Pull also passed away. I had moved out of the area at the time, but I know a number of band's people were able to be present for his funeral at Thames Salvation Army. So I mentioned earlier about the Salvation Army bandmaster. His name has come back to me. His name was Ray Dodrell, and one of the highlights just before he passed away was we had a big combined concert with Kerepehi Band and a number of other Salvation Army bands as a tribute to him. We would have had about of Tauranga, Hamilton, maybe Matamata Salvation Army bands all there playing with Kerepehi Band in tribute to him about a month before he passed away, and then again for his funeral, and were able to form a guard of honour as they took the coffin from the service, so out in the street while it drove off, which was a very and playing music at the same time was a very meaningful thing that we did. Another thing that happened during my time with the band was what's become, I'm quite glad to say, a little tradition, was the annual Christmas carols in the Karangahape Gorge. So I was playing in a number of other bands as well as bandmaster at Kerepehi in about 2015, and thought at the end of the year, why don't we get a group of people together and go into the gorge and play some Christmas carols in such a special location. So we put the invitation out for all the bands that I was involved with just to come informally to play. We didn't want to have it too big an event and worry the council at the time with it, so we didn't make it an official Kerepehi Band or anything event. It was just all comers could come and play. And then the next year it was suggested we do it again, so we did it again. The first year we would have had, I think, about 10 or 11 people turn up, and I think every year it's got bigger and bigger. We initially had people like George Ware, who played bass with the Salvation Army Band in Waihi. And I remember Joe having to carry his bass because George was in his 80s at that stage and couldn't manage. We played in the Windows Walk the first few years, and that was moved to the railway tunnel and the other walks in more recent times because the Windows Walk's been closed for repairs and things like that. So that's a little highlight of my time there. The people that were involved, I have special fond memories of people like Andrew Willis, who was president of the band when I first joined and really did a lot of good for the band and establishing good connections with other groups within the area. Also, of course, Rowan, who has been a great friend over the years. It became a tradition in the latter years of my time as bandmaster that he would invite me for dinner between teaching our beginner students. We had about between 3 and 20 students at various times, which I was teaching and during my time with the band, and instead of me trying to bring a sandwich or so, he invited me round for dinner with him and Vivian, so that became quite a tradition for a number of years, and I have a great deal of respect. He's a very good friend. So but also the support and help I had from people like Jack Brooks in the early days especially, who was a great help. And then in latter years from Heather O'Hagan and Raywin Leonhardt, who was Jack's daughter, support running the band and organising the music and all that, those sorts of things. And then in latter times Luke has stepped up, and it's great to see some of the work that we all put in as a band back when we were really down in numbers, continuing with people like Luke, keeping up the momentum of things happening. Another thing that we had been members of the Waikato Bay of Plenty Brass Band Association, but although we'd been paying our subscriptions every year, we hadn't heard very much from them. We'd never been notified when they were running events, invited to any of their contests or their youth days or anything else that they were having. We seemed to have fallen off the communication lines, so I'm very glad that we were able to get them re-established in my time that I was there. We went to a couple of AGMs and to see that we're now getting more involved, and even managed to host the youth day they run this year, and for the first time in about 15 years or so we're able to play at the contest last year, and it was very nice to be invited back to be a guest conductor for that, so hopefully that will continue. So one thing I will finish off with about my time as bandmaster in the band is that for the last 3 or 4 years my health was really not the best that it could have been, and I'm really grateful to the support and help from many of the people within the band for keeping things rolling over and going through what was a very difficult time for me. But as I said before in the last one, I'm so glad to see that we were able to keep the momentum up, and that it's continued under Peter and now Alistair, and with all the work that Luke's doing to keep things going. My wife, at the time that I was bandmaster, moved to Wellington in 2012, and she had a personal tragedy in 2019 where her brother took his own life. I went down to Wellington to look after her, and at the end of that year decided that the best thing to do would be to move to Wellington to look after, to be with her, and to move permanently down there. As it turned out, things didn't quite work out that way, and I'm back up this way, but my move down there was what prompted my resignation. And because my health hasn't been as good as it could be, I haven't felt able to take on the role of bandmaster again, even though people have asked if I'd be interested. So, but it was a lovely time there, and I feel very proud both of my time and involvement with the band, but also with the work of everybody involved at the time, to see the band go from averaging 5 to 7 players at a rehearsal to averaging, when I left it was averaging about 23 to 25, and it's now over 30 often at rehearsal. So I'm really pleased to see that the band is back on track and doing all sorts of things. So I hope my involvement will continue, even though I may no longer be a member of the band, but it's nice to be part of things, and I certainly hope that the growth that's seen in recent years continues for many years to come.